So the investigation of the plane crash, the helicopter and plane crash in Washington, D.C. back in January that killed more than 67 people has been completed, and it doesn't look good in the sense that it seems that the pilot was given instructions repeatedly to do the right thing, and well, it seems that she did not do the right thing or what was needed to do. An investigation has revealed that the female pilot who killed 67 people after crashing a Black Hawk into a passenger plane in DC in January was told repeatedly by her male co-pilot to turn before the collision, but she did not heed his warnings. And I can already hear some of you saying, why are you mentioning their gender? Why are you saying that the pilot was female and the co-pilot was male? Well, one thing that we need to address, of course, is the amount of times in recent history that DEI has killed people, like literally killed people. And the second thing that you might remember is the time they took to reveal the identity of the pilot for some reason. We have the idea that if he had been a male, especially a white male pilot, it would have been revealed immediately. But well, not only did she ignore her more experienced male co-pilot, but also the air traffic controller, which informed her of the oncoming plane. Ironically, Rebecca Loback, the female pilot, was on her annual piloting evaluation to ensure her skills were up to snuff. A night flight on a very congested area, that was quite a test, not gonna lie. Her string of blunders caused the deadliest aviation disaster since 9/11. So you have to understand that, yeah, it's like one of the worst aviation disasters in the United States, in the history of the United States. So Savannah Hernandez, remember the DC helicopter crash? So we have this. This is from the New York Times. 2 seconds after the controllers cut out instruction about passing behind the jet, because that was the idea, for the helicopter to be at 200 feet and passing behind the jet, and especially if she had turned left, this would have been prevented. Warrant Officer Eves, the male co-pilot, there were 2 in the helicopter, replied, affirming for the second time that the Black Hawk saw the traffic. PAT-25 has the aircraft in sight to request visual separation, he said. VSEP approved, the controller replied. It was their last communication. The Black Hawk was 15 seconds away from crossing paths with the jet. Warrant Officer Eves then turned his attention to Captain Loback. He told her he believed that air traffic control wanted them to turn left toward the East River bank. Turning left would have opened up more space between the helicopter and Flight 5342, which was heading for runway 33 at an altitude of roughly 300 feet. So they were essentially at the same altitude because the helicopter was at 280 feet approximately. But then she did not turn left for some reason that nobody will be able to explain ever. Feel free to have your hypothesis in the comments, but I don't know. I asked this question on X, but for what reason, after listening air traffic controller say what was going on in a very congested area, that she should be turning left to open up more space of the oncoming plane, and she should have been flying way lower than that. Why did this happen? This shouldn't have happened. Anomaly, for those wondering, the report just dropped. The report for us is from the New York Times. So this is not a right-wing conspiracy or no. This is from the New York Times. So you at least know that they're going to bury the DEI non-decision at the end of the article, granted, but it's there. The missteps that led to fatal plane crash at Reagan National Airport. They really could have made this piece like 3 paragraphs long, but did an entire investigation trying to blame everyone but the pilot. And it normally says, I posted your post to my Facebook. I just always verify to see where it came from. And yes, and we now know where it comes from. MJ Tonko. We now know the official cause of the DC plane crash collision that killed a total of 67 people. And in part of the New York Times report, you see that missteps, equipment problems, and a common but risky practice led to a fatal crash. New details revealed by the Times show the complex failures on this crash, and highlighted in yellow. Okay. What we just read, that she did not turn left. And also, Captain Lovac says she would, but 2.5 minutes later, the Black Hawk still was above 200 feet, a dangerously high level. So the helicopter, the Black Hawk, spent more than 2.5 minutes after she being told that she should lower the aircraft, go lower than 200 feet for safety. 2.5 minutes is forever in flight time, especially in such a congested area. An altitude of 400 feet would have been unacceptable and could have positioned the Black Hawk uncomfortably close to departing or landing airplanes. By about 8:44 p.m., it seemed to be in a more appropriate spot. As the helicopter approached the Key Bridge, from which it would fly south along the river, Warrant Officer Eves stated that it was at 300 feet and descended to 200 feet necessary because the maximum height for its route closer to the airport had dropped to 200 feet. That's another thing that I don't understand. They should have like electronic alarms or something, or maybe the alarm doesn't know exactly where the aircraft is, so it is on the pilot's responsibility to say, okay, I'm approaching this. I'm talking to the air traffic controller. They're telling me that I should approach under this elevation and then go for that elevation. But that didn't happen either. But even as it reached that juncture, Warrant Officer Eves evidently felt obligated to repeat his instruction. It was at 300 feet. You have to lower. You have to go lower. And, well, more reports. The New York Times story on the January DC plane crash hides its takeaway until the last sentences. The lady helicopter pilot ignored multiple warnings from her right seat about altitude and his directly telling her to turn away, and flew straight into a passenger jet. Yeah, that was horrific. There are some further opinions. It was back in February 19 from Johan P. The black box, the Black Hawk's black box recordings, they already knew what was going on back then. It's a jaw dropper. Altitude chaos. The chopper's altimeter was off, way off. Pilot read 300 feet. Instructor saw 400. But the real number was 278 feet, well above the 200-foot ceiling. They were flying blind on bad data. So one thing that we can agree is that there was a malfunction of the altimeter in principle, right? Miscalls. Air traffic control screamed, "Pass behind the jet," but the pilots didn't hear it. The mic was keyed at the worst moment, drowning out the warning. Seconds later, boom. Last second panic. The jet's pilots tried to pull up, nose pitch up just before impact. Too late. The Black Hawk crew, no clue what hit them till it did. Night vision goggles. I think this was one of the most important things that happened in that catastrophe. They were wearing night vision goggles, NVG, but did they obscure the jet's lights? Experts say it's possible they locked onto the wrong target in DC's crowded skies. You know that you have night vision goggles and they enhance every single source of light, and if you have a very bright city, it's gonna enhance every single light in the city, every single light in the airport. That is gonna be a mess. This wasn't just one mistake. It was a cascade of failures. 67 lives gone. There's also this. I wanted to talk about Vet Norm that did a very good analysis back in February, and he was recapping of what could have happened, like assembling right now with the investigation and what the black box said back in January. I am presenting a hypothesis that the Black Hawk pilot was at fault and caused the DC crash. The Black Hawk pilot worked as a White House aide for the last 18 to 24 months. It is highly unlikely that she had any time to log hours as a pilot. White House connections were probably used to schedule her some piloting time before she left DC. This request was done using the cover of annual training. A check ride is a practical exam that a pilot must pass to be qualified to perform specific aircrew or mission duties. The Army does 3 types of check rides: instrument, annual, and night vision goggles, NVG. This was a combined annual and night vision goggle check ride. Who wouldn't want to fly over the capital region at a night? However, this would lead to deadly consequences. The schedule to fly at night was possibly done because this was most likely a last-minute, maybe months request for this mission. The night flight schedule may have been the only time available because of normal military operations. The night flight may have been a request by the pilot who wanted to get an NVG flight under her belt, like 2 birds with a stone. This flight was just over a week after the inauguration, so the request was made before the president took office. Whatever the reason for the night flight is what doomed all those involved. You are talking about a highly congested flight area of commercial and military aircraft. According to others, a night flight crew should have had 4 personnel on the helicopter. This was one thing that in my limited knowledge of these matters, only 2 people piloting a helicopter at night with night vision goggles. It is really cumbersome. It is extremely cumbersome to be able to keep track of everything, keep track of the controls. Everything is this shade of gray. Is very hard to be able to look properly and at night. And in that area, such a congested area, the difficulty is insane. So a 4 personnel on the helicopter would have provided visual coverage on both sides of the rotary aircraft. It is becoming apparent now that the NVGs, the night vision goggles that can create tunnel vision, restricted the vision of the crew because, yeah, you have these huge things in front of your head and you have a very limited field of vision, a very limited field of vision. You have to be turning your head to be able to have a sense of what is going around you. And if you have planes taking off and landing, that is that is just a mess. A pilot who may not have flown for nearly 2 years should have not been scheduled for a night flight. A pilot whose skills may have atrophied should not have tried to fly with NVGs. We need to know the following. Was the pilot assigned to the unit that conducted the flight? Who put in the request for this particular training mission? Who requested a night flight for annual training? Who requested night vision goggles usage for the flight? When was the request made for this flight? Who in the military chain of command approved the mission, the parameters, and the crew? Why were there only 3 people used to man the Black Hawk crew? Where is the flight operations paperwork with the pre-approved flight path? Who conducted the safety briefing for the mission? Who was specifically briefed about night flight dangers? When was the last time the pilot flew an aircraft? Very important. How many night flights had the pilot flown previously? Because it's a completely different beast than a regular day flight. It is now becoming obvious that the Black Hawk crew, particularly the pilot, was off the pre-approved flight path. Reports indicate that the aircraft was flying at a higher altitude and a speed disregarding the flight plan, but we also know that the altimeter was some kind of fault with the altimeter. If there is no technical fault that can account for the excess speed and altitude, then we are left looking at a human problem. It just seems to have been a lot of risk without many answers. Answers to those questions could change the hypothesis. I hope I'm wrong and that technical flaws are at fault. Hiding the name of the pilot and reports of scrubbing that person's social media makes it very suspicious. That this happens so often that they try to hide the reality of things that you only are just left with questions. Why did they try? Why did they screw the social media? Why did they try to hide the identity of the pilot for so long? Again, this is still a tragedy. The fact that she did not listen to the, I don't know if to call them suggestions or commands of the co-pilot, eventually led to the catastrophe, but I would still like to know what you think about this in the comments. Remember to download my free 100 bottle language tips right in the description of this video and in the pinned comment. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the bottle language guy. Much love and bliss.